dear mother, you will, I know, have been longing to hear from me. I do not know how much you've heard since the last note I sent you from the GPO. We decided, in order to prevent further slaughter, to ask the general commanding the British forces to discuss terms. Our hope is that the government will spare the lives of all our followers, but we do not expect that they will spare the lives of the leaders. You must not grieve for all of this. We have preserved Ireland's honour and our own. Our deeds of last week are the most splendid in Ireland's history. People will say hard things of us now, but we shall be remembered by posterity and blessed by unborn generations. Love to Wow MB, Miss Byrne, and your own dear self. P.S. I understand that the German expedition which I was counting on actually set sail, but was defeated by the British.
I understand we need to come down hard, but we're in a legal gray area here. Once a rebellion has been suppressed, martial law doesn't allow for summary executions. There has to be a process.
It's all bloody red tape.
I hope you were careful. There's nothing incriminating in it.
Does it matter? My name is in ink at the bottom of the proclamation.
Nevertheless, I've never been fond of giving people a stick to beat you with. They often choose to beat your friends too.
Dora, the Defense of the Realm Act doesn't allow for the death penalty unless we can prove they assisted the enemy. If you want these men to pay with their lives, you need a smoking gun, and it has to be a German one.
Open it. Read the postscript.
I understand that the German expedition set sail.
I'm a barrister, Father. I know the consequences. I don't believe my mother concerns herself with German expeditions. That's there for one reason and one reason only.
They can't hang you without it.
Precisely. It's not an oversight, Father. It's my death warrant.
Honestly, Patrick.
There is another way. Give them a public trial, starting with Pierce. It's an opportunity. We can dismantle their reputation, their entire ideology. The judge gives the death penalty, and we ensure that they don't become martyrs.
I must die for any of this to matter.
Our Lord knew he must die. He didn't bring it upon himself. This is about more than just you, Patrick. This letter could condemn everyone to death. I can't stand over that. Without it, the British might be forced to give you a public trial.
I'll find proof of the German plot.
And if you don't?
You can have your bloody trial. But I won't have any public in the courthouse.
The press can carry the message to the people.
The publicity. Just think about that. Hold your words today and speak many more tomorrow. If you want all this to matter. If you want a legacy. This is your chance.
My lord, the King's Justice proceeds to the pleads of the Crown versus Patrick Pierce. who stands indicted and charged before the jury with the primary offense of high treason. By adhering to the king's enemies, the Empire of Germany, the accused intended for use the prosecution of the war against our Lord the King and his subjects. Judge Bonham presiding.
Mr. Banks, you may begin the case for the prosecution.
Gentlemen of the jury, the man who sits before you in the dock is charged with numerous offenses against the peace and His Majesty's realm, the most serious of which is high treason, a crime for which we will seek the death penalty. The prosecution will call numerous witnesses to prove that the defendant, 1, was a key leader of the rebellion and an ideological figurehead. 2, that he and the other rebels betrayed the realm in its greatest hour of need. 3, that they abandoned the rule of law and democracy without any justifiable cause. The Home Rule, for which so many Irish citizens worked, is already on the statute books. 4, that they did unduly endanger the lives of soldiers and civilians and caused the tragic deaths of many hundreds. And lastly, but certainly not least, that the defendant himself is a fanatical extremist, hell-bent on a blood sacrifice for his own vainglorious ego. Gentlemen, this is an important case, not simply because of the scale of death and destruction that lies in its wake, but because the very integrity and future of our society depends upon it. You must ask yourself this pertinent question. If we allow a radical minority to style themselves as revolutionaries on behalf of a majority who value peace, democracy, and the safety of their families, if we allow them to take the law into their own hands in our name, what sort of message will this send? What sort of future do we create? There is a better way. There is a more civilized way. Thank you.
They can say what they want. I'm not concerned.
You should be. You bloody well should be. Think about his Svengali defense. Clark pulled the strings.
Edward, we talked about this.
He was the ringleader who built the IRB into what it is. He planned the rebellion. You were merely a figurehead, a public face for the younger generation.
Don't insult me. A figurehead. You demean everything we did if you think for one moment I would betray Tom Clark or anyone else. You make a mistake, Edward. You believe this is about the law. It's not. It's about our legacy.
Legacy. By the time they're done with you, your name will be so blackened that people will spit it sooner than sing it. Is that the legacy you want? Then best not roll over and play dead.
One of my men, Lieutenant King, was captured by the rebels and held prisoner at the General Post Office. He spent days observing the rebels and was able to identify the accused as one of their senior leaders.
And your own interactions with the defendant?
I met him on Moore Street on Saturday, the 29th of April, to accept their surrender. He identified himself as their representative leader, and there were no other combatants with him. He was accompanied by a volunteer nurse, Miss Elizabeth O'Farrell. I am also of the understanding that it was he who read out the so-called proclamation at the start of the week. So the facts to me are clear. I'm in no doubt that he was the leader of this rabble and should be convicted of treason.
Perhaps I should rest my case here.
My lord, does the witness want to be judge, jury, and executioner?
Relevant opinion, my lord.
General, answer only what you're asked. You may proceed.
I have everything I need.
General Lowe, when you accepted his surrender, what reason did the defendant give you?
His men were surrounded and hopelessly outnumbered.
Did he say these words? May I remind you that you're still under oath?
No, he did not. I am surmising.
This is the defendant's actual note of surrender to be entered into evidence. Would you be so kind as to read it out to the court?
In order to prevent the further slaughter of Dublin's citizens...
In order to prevent the further slaughter of Dublin's citizens. Sounds like quite a specific reason to me. May I ask if there's any mention of being surrounded or outnumbered?
No, there is not.
So what exactly is this slaughter that he refers to in the note? Could it be the massacre of 15 innocent civilians in North King Street by British troops on your order, or the murder of noted pacifist Francis Sheehy Skeffington and 2 other innocents at Portobello Barracks?
My lord, I beg you. This is beyond the pale. Introducing unsubstantiated rumors as evidence.
Mr. Green, try that again, and I'll be forced to discharge the jury. You may continue, General.
By their actions, the rebels put themselves outside the law. Now, I can assure you that these murderous traitors are the root cause of all the bloodshed. Had they not begun their slaughter, none of us would be sitting here.
They started it. They started it. That's your justification.
My initial feeling. I must admit it was one of detestation and horror. It wasn't half so much treason to the Allies as treason to Home Rule.
Why so?
In 86 and 93, bills were struck down because of Unionist opposition. I have dedicated my life's work to getting this bill over the line in Westminster.
You were inches away from the final success, and yet you had the good grace to set it aside when war broke out. Is that correct?
I shared many people's belief that the time to break away from the Union was not during a crisis. Postponing of Home Rule was strictly temporary.
Do you believe there was any cause for the actions of the defendant and his fellow rebels?
There was a peaceful, legitimate road to having our own parliament in Dublin. Not one solitary soul needed to die. This was a wicked act, and made more wicked and insolent by the fact that Germany plotted it. Germany organized it, and Germany paid for it.
My lord, German support has not been proven. I must object.
Have your witness back up his claims or withdraw them.
Withdrawn. Mr. Redmond, do you know the defendant?
Somewhat. He was a supporter of Home Rule once. He even spoke at a rally in support of the cause not so long ago. But he has become much more extreme in his views.
Did you have a good relationship?
I can't say I knew him all that well. He was a little aloof. It was hard to tell if it was shyness or superiority. He always spoke well, though. I'll give him that.
No further questions, my lord.
Mr. Redmond, you say you and Pierce shared a dream. What was that dream?
Irish freedom, of course.
That will be all. No further questions.
No further questions. I could think of enough to sit him there till sundown. You allowed him to suggest that Home Rule was already in place. We both know Ulster's up in arms about it. We could be looking at a civil war before it ever comes to pass. And yet he sits there and tries to suggest it's all going to happen without a single gun fired. At least we've changed the conversation. We made it about a republic, not some puppet parliament.
Steady on, Patrick. Anyone would think you want to win this thing.
The prosecution calls Private Daniel Bailey.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Private Bailey, you have seen action at the front.
Yes, sir. Royal Irish Rifles, 2nd Battalion.
Can you describe for the court the scenes you witnessed?
My lord, what's the relevance of this?
The crime of treason is greater, my lord, when the realm is in its darkest days. I am merely trying to paint a picture.
Mr. Green, I'll thank you not to grandstand at every minor digression. You may proceed.
Did you ever have nightmares, sir? Where every time you fall back asleep, the same thing happens? Well, over there, it's every time you wake. Mortar fire. Machine guns. Fellas in triage, screaming. Lads who didn't make it back. Crying out in no man's land to nobody. The camp was easy in comparison, sir.
The POW camp. Take us back, if you would. You were captured.
Yes, sir. Eventually they took me to Limburg in Germany, where all the Irish prisoners were.
I'm sorry, Private Bailey. You'll have to explain to me why there was a special camp in Germany reserved only for the Irish prisoners.
It was because of Roger Casement, sir. That's where I met him.
Is this the same Roger Casement who stands accused of high treason for smuggling arms from Germany to Ireland?
Yes, sir.
What was he doing in your POW camp?
He arrived in the camp last April. He spoke to me about joining this Irish brigade to help fight for Irish freedom. I just joined to get out of Germany.
Why did the Germans allow this?
They didn't allow it, sir. They encouraged it. Casement had made a deal with them. They'd supply arms and support for the Rising in whatever way they could.
One final question, if I may. Is it your understanding that the leaders in Dublin, among whom the defendant counts himself, intended to use the arms to attack Britain?
Yes, sir.
No further questions, my lord.
Private Bailey, I'm going to read you some facts from your military record. I simply want you to confirm if they are true or false. In 1906, you were docked 6 days' pay for absence.
True.
In 1909, you were on trial for charges of going absent without leave.
True.
Part of those charges included losing by neglect your equipment and clothing.
True.
Paints quite a picture. God be with whoever found you that day.
My lord, humiliating the witness.
Stick to your facts, Mr. Green.
Once more, true or false? You know the accused, or have at least met him even once?
False.
You have some kind of documentation or evidence to prove that Casement wasn't acting alone or merely delusional. Anything at all that links Casement to the accused.
You have my word, sir.
You want us to trust the word of an unreliable soldier who joined the British Army for the money, then turned sides to collaborate with the Germans, only to become a turncoat once again, providing evidence to the British to save his own skin.
I'm not a liar, sir.
That may be, but you bring no proof of your claims. No further questions.
Would you consider yourself to be Irish, Mrs. Dietrichson?
Of course. Black Rock, born and bred, sir.
But you have lived in England since you married, is that correct?
If I live on a farm, does that make me a cow?
No, it does not.
No more than being Irish makes me an agitator. I don't think the lines we draw between us do us any great service.
So, when the British troops arrived in Kingstown, you welcomed them because you believed they would restore peace.
I wanted them to keep my children safe. I took my children out on the road to welcome them as they marched into the city. The whole neighborhood was out. That's when I saw my husband.
Your husband, who you believed to be in France?
Yes. He'd been there for months. His redeployment to Dublin was in great haste. I never got word.
Did he know you would be in Dublin?
No. I was only visiting my family for the Easter holiday.
So neither of you knew the other would be in Dublin, and you're reunited with your husband for the first time in months. How did that feel?
I hugged my husband for longer than was natural. I could have hugged him for longer, only the children, they were so excited.
How long did you have with him?
5 minutes, perhaps.
And then he marched onward to Mount Street Bridge. Can you tell me what happened to him there?
He was shot, sir. Killed in action.
I know this may be difficult to speak of, but can you tell me what was found on your husband's person?
There were 3 letters, sir. 2 of them he'd received from the children when he was in France. He kept them on him at all times. The 3rd was one he'd just finished writing that morning. He didn't have time to post it. It was addressed to me.
Tragic. He survived for months on the front lines in France, only to be killed on the streets of his wife's hometown. And he was not the only casualty. North of 100 soldiers were killed that day, ambushed by snipers hiding in buildings. Is that correct?
I believe so.
That's all I have, my lord.
No questions from the defense. But if I may, I'd like to address the court in the absence of the jury.
Very well. Thank you for your evidence, Mrs. Dietrichson. My lord, this endless stream of victims does not establish the facts of the case. My learned friend is clearly trying to manipulate the jury's emotions. I am moved to object in the strongest possible terms.
Nonsense. I'm simply trying to establish that the insurrection was not supported by the very people it claimed to be emancipating. Besides, how can I establish the innocence of a victim without hearing their story?
Do you really have to pull the heartstrings like some bloody puppeteer?
Mr. Green, I will ask you to keep your frustrations in check. The witnesses are perfectly legitimate.
Bridget Allen, 16, bullet wound. Christopher Andrews, 14, bullet wound. Mary Brunswick, 15, laceration of the brain. Christina Caffrey, 2 years old, bullet wound. William Mullen, 9, shot in the thorax. Margaret Veal, 13, shot at her window. Eleanor Warbrook, 15, shot in the head. Christopher Cathcart, 10, bullet wound. John Gibney, 5, multiple wounds as a result of cannonading. Patrick Kelly, 12. Gunshot wound to the neck. Sean Francis Foster, 2, shot in the head in his pram.
Over 30 children, each one dead before the age of 16. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Of course, there were many more adults apart from these children.
We don't have final figures for adults just yet. It's difficult to prove which deaths occurred as a direct result of the insurrection.
Forgive me, Doctor, these were children, not old men dropping dead on Sackville Street. In your opinion, would any of these deaths have occurred had it not been for the rebellion?
I don't believe so.
No further questions, my lord.
We are all, of course, deeply saddened by the loss of such innocent lives. If I may, I'd like to pick up on some of the causes of death. I noticed a high number of bullet wounds, as opposed to, say, shrapnel, debris, collapsing buildings, fires even.
I don't record what could have happened, only what did.
Of course. But the position of these wounds was something of a surprise to me. A high number of head wounds, neck wounds. The thorax was mentioned a number of times. Very few leg wounds, for example. Why do you think that might have been?
I deal only with the dead, sir. Leg wounds are less likely to kill.
So, if all of these deaths were unintended, were these poor children merely unfortunate to have been shot in the head?
I would think it unlikely that each incident was an accident.
So some of these children may have been deliberately shot. By whom?
That I do not know.
I'll rephrase. What reason would anyone have to shoot civilians?
Perhaps to stop looters? To restore law and order?
Strange. I've never seen a rebel who was trying to restore law and order. Have you?
No, sir.
No further questions.
We'd my mother over for Easter Sunday dinner, but by Monday morning, we needed a few bits and pieces, so I packed the young ones into the pram.
Your two children. For the record, how old were they?
Sean had just gone too. Ted was younger. He was 7 months at the time. It was easier to have them both in the pram for the market.
Oh, of course.
I was headed down through Stony Bar. I met people talking about shooting in town, but it sounded like something small, so I cut across North King Street and where I saw the volunteers. I knew there were volunteers from the bits of uniform they had on them, and the hats and all. They had a sort of barricade set up around Church Street. Before I had any time to worry, I heard the gunshots.
From the volunteers?
I didn't know where it was coming from, did I? Noise of them was everywhere. I just ran.
Where did you run to?
Over towards Father Matthew Hall there. It didn't even seem like getting hit the pram. It was like a small rip just opened in it. I was inside before I knew what happened. There was a priest there. I tried to say it, but I just screamed. I couldn't get any words out.
What did you want to say?
They've shot my baby.
Sean Francis Foster, 2 years old, shot in the head in his pram. I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Foster. No further questions.
No questions, my lord.
I understand, Edward. I'm not suggesting you should have ambushed her, but to decline to even establish the facts.
Sometimes perception is more important than facts. It would have been counterproductive.
We still had strong communications at that point. I was getting messages from every garrison, including North King Street. I know that bullet came from a British Lancer. That's important to Edward. Anyone would think you want to lose this thing.
What's important is picking your battles. Unlike you and your friends, I prefer to win mine.
You have to ask yourself what counts as a win.
Nothing less than Irish freedom.
Oh, come on. You and I, Patrick, we're on the same side. Both of us with English blood and an Irish heart. But please, I beg some pragmatism.
I meant what I said, George. That freedom might not come today, but I want anything that will bring it closer.
Do you want to die for the sake of it? Do you want to be spared and wait for a republic? Do you want to be Robert Emmet, or do you just want a soapbox?
I've been speaking to your mother. She's anxious to see you.
I don't think it would do her any good to see me while my fate remains uncertain. It would be hard for her.
For her or for you?
What about my brother? I don't suppose they tolerate a letter.
Between two rebels? Hardly. I could relay a message to him verbally. What would you like to say?
No, just tell him I asked after him. Tell him I'm thinking of him.
And your mother?
Very well. On one condition. I can't have her see me here. Perhaps you could inquire into a visitation room. Somewhere without the feel of a guillotine over my head. I don't want to upset her.
The fact is, they've proven your involvement. They've only got one thing left. Mud. They're going to sling it at you and then make it stick. They're going to attack you personally. Taunt you with every mistake you've ever made and every word you've ever uttered. You need to be ready. Turn the other cheek for now, but close your fist and be ready. You'll get your chance.
The prosecution calls Mr. Bulmer Hobson.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Mr. Hobson, can you tell me what happened to you on Friday, the 21st of April?
I was kidnapped and held prisoner by members of the IRB.
The Irish Republican Brotherhood. Presumably they gave you an indication as to why they did this.
No indication was needed. I knew exactly what was happening. The second I walked into that room, I saw the glint of their revolvers.
Can you elaborate for the jury, Mr. Hobson? How exactly did you know?
The night before, Monday, Thursday, I got word that an insurrection was being planned for the Sunday. Naturally, I went to Owen McNeill's house to see if he was aware of it. Even as head of the volunteers, he was in the dark. It was late, but we couldn't let the matter rest, so we went to see Pierce. It was 2 a.m. by the time we got there. We had to wake him.
How did the defendant react to your arrival?
I can't say he was pleased. But he was adamant that the rising was inevitable. That's the kind of person he is. Always has some curious Old Testament notion of fate or blood sacrifice or being the scapegoat of the people. He knew right and well we'd try to stop it, so yes. The following day, when I was asked to attend this IRB meeting in Phibsborough, it's fair to say I was suspicious.
So why did you attend at all?
I'm a patriot, sir. I believe the insurrection was the wrong course of action. It was little more than another pointless protest. For one thing, the entire enterprise goes against the IRB's constitution.
How so?
After the failure of the Fenian Rising in '67, the IRB inserted a clause which requires the decision of the Irish nation as expressed by the majority of the Irish people before any sort of action was taken against Britain. I'd like to set the record straight here today. As far as I'm concerned, the IRB weren't responsible for this, nor were the Irish Volunteers. It was a junta, a breakaway group within both organisations. They pulled the wool over everyone's eyes.
So why did you go to the meeting?
Because it was my duty to talk sense into whoever I could.
But they held you prisoner to ensure the rising went ahead.
That's correct.
How long did they keep you?
3 days. On Easter Monday, they knew as well as I did that it was too late to stop it.
Tell me, how well did you know the accused?
Quite well indeed. It's fair to say we didn't see eye to eye. I'm a pragmatist. Him? He's the kind of sentimental egotist I find hard to tolerate. He didn't even contribute to the hard grinding work of building up this movement. He and some of his friends simply hijacked it to their own ends.
You seem to be describing him as some sort of messianic figure.
He certainly saw himself as some kind of messiah, yes.
Do you agree with his self-assessment?
No, I do not.
Thank you. That will be all.
You're not hurt.
Fighting fit. Have you seen Willie? Conas atá sé.
Gama. Carsúlad féin, ní le nagla air don báis.
English.
I have time in here to think. To remember. Maybe for the first time in years. I keep thinking about Aunt Maggie. The old Fenian ballads she used to teach me.
I remember you marching around the house carrying the broom as a pike, singing to yourself. Da-dee-da-dum, da-dee-da-dum, da-dee-da-dee-da-dum.
Maggie once told me that Fenians used to run their drills in secret places in the Dublin hills. And for all she knew, they were there still. So, one night I headed off on my bicycle. I wanted to find them. And I cycled around for hours, till it got dark. I remember how quiet and cold it got.
You must have been scared.
No, just lonely, I think. Next time she visited, I said it to her. I've been through all the glens, I said. And there were no Fenians drilling anywhere. They must have all died. And she just laughed.
They're not all dead, Pat. You're still here. I can't lose you both, Pat.
Tá sé an cróga ar fád is féidir leat a bheith bródúlas.
English, or it's back to your cell.
Stop it, Patrick.
I did waver slightly. I can't deny it. I had reason to believe that a crackdown on the volunteers was imminent, and so I was tempted to support armed resistance.
So why did you choose to oppose it?
Would have been irresponsible to send volunteers to certain failure. I did everything in my power to stop it.
Why were you so certain of failure? Were you aware of the shipment of arms that was intercepted?
I was.
Were you aware of its origin?
That shipment had little to do with me. I don't know much about it.
If you knew it was intercepted, you knew something.
I wasn't involved, so I'm not aware of the facts.
May I remind you that you are under arrest and under oath?
We've had our disagreements, but I won't incriminate friends without the full facts, no matter how much you want me to.
Friends, you say. Take me back, if you will, to when you first met the defendant. You were firm friends, were you not?
Well, he is a good deal younger than I. I think he simply looked up to me in a way. We met through our involvement in the Gaelic League. We share a love of the language.
You speak in the past tense.
And I'm not sure that he looks up to me anymore. Evidently, our political views began to diverge.
What sort of person would you say the defendant is?
I believe he's something of a romantic at heart.
A romantic?
Well, yes. In his school, St. Enda's, he fills the boys' heads with those legends of Cuchulainn, Fionn McCool, good versus evil.
Indeed. He said he would preach to those boys the antique faith that fighting is the only noble thing, and that he only is at peace with God who is at war with the powers of evil. Do you recognize those words?
I do. They're from his essay on education.
And what about this passage in support of war? The old heart of the earth needed to be warmed with the red wine of the battlefields. Such august homage was never before offered to God as this, the homage of millions of lives given gladly for love of country. Do you recognize these words?
I do. I can't say I agree with them.
Would you agree that his ideas on education involved the poisoning of young minds?
Sir, if you think it is such a sin to teach the glories of death in battle, may I suggest that you stop paying your taxes? After all, they merely fund the British Army, who've sent more than a few boys to their deaths with notions in their heads. There's your poison, sir.
The British Army is not on trial here, Mr. McNeil. Mr. Banks, you may proceed.
Back to this romantic nature you refer to. Did the defendant enjoy the company of women?
I can't say that I ever saw him with a woman, but he was very dedicated to the work and the language. I wouldn't have expected him to be distracted.
You say he looked up to you in a way. What way was that?
I don't have to answer that.
Let me put it another way. Can you tell me what Pierce's reaction was when he heard you were getting married?
I don't see how that is relevant.
I'll worry about the relevancy, Mr. McNeil. You are simply here to answer questions.
I don't know what his reaction was. I didn't see it firsthand.
But you heard, did you not, from a common friend, one Eamon O'Neill?
Yes, but...
Answer the question. What was his reaction?
I'm told he almost wept. Simply because it might lessen my activities in the Gaelic League.
This is slanderous and irrelevant. The defense won't stand for it.
I'm inclined to agree.
Mr. McNeil, you are under subpoena. Stay where you are, or you'll be held in contempt.
No further questions, my lord.
I told you, Patrick. I told you it would be like this.
You didn't tell me you'd sit there idle like an obedient Labrador.
Tackling the accusations only gives them further oxygen. We held our nerve. We let it pass. We'll defend you when the time is right.
Never mind the character assassination. You think I care? This isn't personal, Edward. It's political. Although I suspect for you it's a bit of both.
What's that supposed to mean?
You let McNeil off on the cross! Just like your pal Redmond.
You treat these moderates with kid gloves because deep down that's what you are. You tolerate the slander because underneath it all you agree with it. You think I'm a radical not to be trusted.
I assure you, this is neither personal nor political. It is purely professional.
I know what the papers are saying. The people on the street are not getting the message of the Rising. They're not seeing what we fought for. This trial isn't just about the battle, it is the battle.
I never signed up to fight, nor would I ever. I'm a man of the law.
Well, you see, that's your problem, Edward. You're a man of their laws, their rules. You don't stand beside us, you stand in judgment.
I'm doing my job.
There's a better job to be done, one which you will not be in a position to do.
Just what are you suggesting?
I'm not suggesting, Edward, I'm telling you. I'm letting you go.
That's ridiculous. The defense opens on Monday. You think you can find a more sympathetic or better prepared barrister in the law library than me?
I won't need to. I'm a barrister. I'll be defending myself.
Coming up tomorrow night at 9 on Trial of the Century.
Must I be hanged?
You wanted a smoking gun? Now you have one.
Once again, the prosecution is straying from the facts to blacken my name. Why would they be desperate, George? They're winning.
If the law is on the wrong side of history, the jury has the opportunity to give it a push.